financial goals. Jacqueline specializes in taking complicated financial concepts and making them really easy to understand for her clients. She specializes in risk management and wealth planning, which is really good. And her clients really benefit from her multifaceted financial plans, ranging from mutual funds to insurance solutions. And in her spare time, she volunteers with Canadian Cancer Society and attends kickboxing classes and tutors students in both math and accounting. So she has a wealth of knowledge. So I really invite you to listen in, take in the information that she is sharing with you, and get an opportunity to just talk to her, especially if you're in the finance field, and that's something that you're going to go in for. She has a wealth of knowledge to really soak it up, as well as if you're just looking to make the most out of the little income. And we all know that working even part-time, we don't make a lot of money, but how we make the most out of the little that we have, how to invest and how to grow the little that we have is really what it's all about. So I invite you to listen in to her, and at the end we'll have also like Q&A, so if you have any questions for her, I'm sure she'll be more than happy to answer questions at the end. I do want to suggest one thing. Before you leave, if you can please kindly do our evaluation before you head out. If you have to leave early, that's fine, we understand that. But please do the evaluation form for us. We have the QR codes for you on the side. If you can just do a click on your phone and do the evaluation form for us, that would be greatly appreciated. So we're always looking for ways to make Career Week and every session better than the year before. Okay? So without further ado, if you can help me welcome Jacqueline. Give her a good warm centennial welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Really, I do a lot of these talks because one of my favorite things, and I wish I had this when I was in school, was just somebody to talk to about little things. Like, until I started working, I didn't know that you had to save money. Like, my mom was a single mom, and just like, you just knew that, like, whenever the bills came, you just go to her account and you pay them. Like, it was just something that you did, and I didn't know that she earned money to pay the bills, and that your bills had to be paid, and you had to save money so that in case your car broke down, you would have money to spend. So I find that these talks are very informative, whether you're just starting school, maybe you guys are graduating. How many of you are graduating next year? Anybody? Ooh, okay, good for a few of you. So you guys are probably going to get your first jobs, and how many of you work part-time right now? Okay, great. So we can focus on a couple of those topics. I'm going to talk to you about how to create a budget, some useful tools that you can use. If you guys want to leave your email, I can send you a couple of resources that you can use. I usually bring paper copies, but I find that even myself, I don't use paper copies anymore. So I'll email you guys the stuff so that you can do it all on your laptops. Also, this session is really catered to this session is really catered to students. As an adult and a working adult, our budgets look completely different, so I wanted to make this as relatable as possible. So student loans, part-time job while you're juggling school, all that kind of stuff to make sure that you get the most out of this session. And if you guys have any questions, you can either raise your hand throughout, just interrupt me in the middle of the presentation, or you can, if you don't want to ask it in front of everybody, we can chat after the presentation. Okay? Okay. So quick agenda, I'm going to introduce myself so you get to know a little bit more about me and what I do, why I do it, why I love it, what your objectives and expectations are of the seminar. I mean, budgeting 101 is pretty straightforward, but sometimes people get really interesting questions, or they say, you know what, I really want to know how to stop my McDonald's habit, or I want to stop my Starbucks habit. Like, can you give me a couple tips? Like, probably not a good example because I have Starbucks right here, but, you know, we can go over that kind of stuff. Budgeting basics, we're hopefully going to go through how to create a budget, how to organize a budget, and everybody's going to be different. Everybody has different circumstances, so I'm going to try to make sure that all of you can relate to it in each of your own ways. We're going to talk very briefly about the types of investments that are available, but we're going to focus on the ones that are most relevant to students. Now, I understand at Centennial you guys have a very large international student population, so it may not everything may be applicable to you, but it's still something to know, because eventually I would hope that you guys stay in Canada and you work in Canada and you get your Canadian citizenship, so it could apply to you, maybe not now, but in the future. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about some money saving tips, because I love saving money, and that's going to be in my introduction. So I grew up in Toronto, I was born just south of the Markham border, so very much Toronto. I went to Queen's University for my Bachelor of Commerce. The reason being is because in high school it took way too much effort to get an A in science that I did not want to have to do that for another 4 years. So business it was. I was good at numbers, I was good at math, I loved making money. When I was 10 years old, I started charging people for using my pencil crayons because they would always return it and it wouldn't be in good condition, so I decided to charge people. I made like $3. That was great. But I decided to become a financial planner because, like I said, my mom was a single mom, and she never really had the time to teach me about savings because I'm not sure if all of you know, and even when you guys, most of you might be even supporting yourselves or even paying your own tuition, it's hard, right? And a lot of the times you don't have enough time to focus on telling people, hey, you need to save money when you're living paycheck to paycheck. Or if your minimum wage job that you're working maybe like 15 hours, and if you're lucky 24 hours of the week is hardly enough to cover your rent, like how do you even find room to save money? So that's really why I got into this business. I really wanted to help people kind of like my mom and kind of more like myself be more smart about their money, because what the rich people don't tell you is that they have strategies in place that makes them and keeps them rich. So why aren't we doing the same, right? And we, at the end of the day, we may not feel like we have as much money as rich people, but we make enough money to live on, and I think that's the most important part, is to make the most of what you have. I love eating, I love movies, I love traveling, so it'll kind of resonate through the presentation. The reason why I save money is so I can eat more and travel more, right? And I think that goes with any good budget. You need a reason to save. If you don't have a reason to save, you're not going to save. And yeah, so I think financial literacy is something that a lot of people are lacking, especially if you grow up in the school system here. A lot of kids, we're pretty privileged here in Canada, and especially in Toronto. We have so many options of eating out. We have so many opportunities. Like, everyone always says that the TTC sucks, but in reality, like, we're quite fortunate to be able to have a subway and to have a bus. So I want to make financial literacy as easy to understand as possible. So again, if you guys have any questions throughout the seminar, just let me know and we can go over it. Okay, so for my objectives of the presentation, I want you to be able to leave the room feeling a little smarter than coming back in, than you came in. So I want you to be able to learn how to create a budget and some tips and tricks on how to follow that budget, because I can tell you most people, you can have a budget, but if you don't follow it, it doesn't really help. Right? And that's probably the number one thing with budgets, is that it's very easy to create, it's very hard to follow. It's kind of like my gym routine. I also want you guys to understand the basic types of investments, like what's available to you to help you grow your money. We're going to look at investment vehicles like a tax-free savings account, an RRSP, what that all means, and whether you need to start doing this now, because I'm sure every time you go to the bank, the teller's probably trying to sell you another credit card and tell you to open up another bank account, and part of you thinks it's really, they're trying to look out for you, but really, they're just trying to sell you another product. So making you more aware of the different investments out there can help you also make the right decisions when you guys open your bank accounts. And then hopefully it inspires you to take some action, right? Does anybody have any expectations? Like, is there something that you really, really wanted to cover that I haven't talked about yet before coming into the session? Yeah. Okay. 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 Yes. Okay. So one of the participants, she wants to learn a little bit more about tax-free savings accounts and RSPs, especially being a newcomer to Canada. How does that affect your ability to use these types of programs? Also, you wanted to talk about mutual funds or maybe other investment options, as well as finally what resources are there available to help with budgeting. So we will definitely cover that, and I'll make sure at the end of the presentation to make sure that I did cover those things. Anybody else? I think that's pretty good. Okay. So I hate presentations. I get very bored very, very quickly. So hopefully my little comics here will give you some visual and mental relief. So the first part of the comment says, it's a brain and a heart, and I love these comics. It says, the brain says, so here's what we can afford. And the heart goes, nope. The brain goes, and then the heart goes, what I want costs more than this. And then the brain says, I understand, but we don't have more. And your heart goes, but I want more. So then your brain goes, there is no more. Why can't you understand this? And I think this is an internal monologue that all of us have with ourselves. And then the heart just goes, shh. And then he takes a match and he lights that's a budget on fire. And then he just goes, shh, don't think about it. So I love this comic so much because that's probably me on a daily basis, if not hourly basis. You're driving, or even when you're walking in the atrium, like when I was walking here today, like I had to pay for parking. Like my brain's probably like, you could have taken the TTC. Was I going to? Definitely not. Would it have saved money? Of course. And then you walk by the second cup, you're like, oh, like maybe I want a cookie to complement my Starbucks. Can I afford it? Yeah. Should I buy it? Probably not. So budgeting is a constant push and pull between your brain and your heart. Your brain is the logical saying, like, if we make $100, we can only spend $100, no more, no less. Whereas your heart goes, well, I just saw these brand new pair of sneakers and I really want it. Or, so the cafeteria is having a sale on fried chicken and I love food, so I'm just going to go. So let's talk a little bit about budgeting basics. And this is another comic that I like, where an angel comes to a human on earth, I would assume, and he says, you need to save more for your future. You wouldn't believe what it costs to rent a decent cloud these days. So now this is talking more about renting, right? Like, how many of you still live at home and how many of you rent? Like, how many of you rent, right? And I mean, as much as we hope that our landlord understands that we're students and we can only afford so much, do they still increase the rent? Heck yeah. Do they still increase, and the utility companies, like they increase all their stuff. So how can we keep up with that kind of stuff? So what is a budget? A budget is basically a list of your estimated income and your estimated expenses. And that's the fancy word for saying how much is coming in, how much money is going into your bank account, and how much money is leaving your bank account. It gives you an idea and a way to try and prioritize your income. So what needs to go out and what can sort of wait to leave your bank account. And we call these budget, and every time you put a budget through, you can kind of look at it and say, are there places that I can improve? So Christmas and the holiday seasons are coming up. A lot of the time, that's a lot of food, a lot of eating out. Some people buy presents. How can we plan for that? And what areas of improvement? Like last year, I spent, let's say, $50 on chocolates for the little kids, but none of their parents allow them to eat chocolates, so I was left with $50 of chocolate to eat for the next 2 months, right? So where can we improve? The number one thing is everyone says, like, why should I have a budget? If I know that every single month I'm not spending more than what I'm making, or my bank account stays at $1,000 a month, why budget? I know that I'm not spending more than I make, I'm fine. Well, there's a couple reasons. It's because if your bank account is not going down, which is already a very good sign, what areas are there to improve to make it go up, right? Maybe you want to avoid high interest debt. Maybe you want to be prepared for emergencies. How many times did you have to write an exam at 8 a.m. in the morning and the lovely TTC decides to break down and now you're late and then you got an Uber and then you're like, oh, I just spent $50 on Uber because it was surge rates, and then it's stressful. So what a budget does, it hones in everything and allows you to be prepared for emergencies. Because the number one thing that causes people stress about money is not that they don't have enough of it, is that they're not prepared when they need more of it, okay? We're also going to talk about debt and how not all debt is bad. There's good debt and there's bad debt. And sometimes it's unavoidable for you to go into debt, but that's not a bad thing. And we're going to talk about ways that we can quickly pay off our debt or make sure that we have a reasonable amount that we can work with. Okay? So this is a little small chart, but it basically tells you what Canadians spend their money on. And the top green one on the top right-hand side, What do you think people spend most of their money on? Rent, exactly. That's the biggest chunk of anything. Shelter. And then the next one would be transportation, which is the lower green one. And then the third one is food. Those three things. And really, as a student, to survive, your fourth one would be tuition. But aside from that, that's generally what you spend your money on. Tuition, rent, food, and transportation, getting to and from school, right? So we're going to focus on these expenses because as a student, that's not that much different than your average Canadian. And we're going to talk about ways to make your tuition more affordable. So creating your budget, and this is I can send everybody. I think it's a 5-page booklet on expenses, and it lists down all the possible expenses there are in the world. So if you forget something, it'll probably be in that book. So if you guys are interested, just leave me your email and I can send that to you. But basically, what it goes through is you need to determine your sources of income. So as a student, it could be your parents, it could be your job. It could be the school. The school could be giving you bursaries. It could be giving you scholarships. That's all a sum of money that you can quantify and you can write down. And that's usually a good starting point for creating a budget. You want to know how much money do you have at any given time, and maybe if we can predict that out for the next 12 months, that's a good place to start. Now, with part-time jobs, the problem is that your hours could vary. Not everybody lives in an idealistic world where everybody gets scheduled 24 hours a week, because sometimes you have exams, you have to take time off, sometimes somebody takes a shift here and there, or sometimes your manager says, hey, you know what, the store's not busy, I don't need you to come in tomorrow, and then you're like, well, now I'm going to be down $100. So being able to be flexible with your budget is also important, and having an idea of how much you get paid on a regular basis is also very important for a budget, because what your budget can be is like a blueprint for, this is the best case scenario, this is the not so good scenario, and this is the worst case scenario, and how will I look in each of those situations. Now, types of expenses, and this is probably the most daunting part of a budget because it can get a little stressful, but I want you to think about it in two ways. The fancy terms are fixed and non-discretionary expenses, and what that basically means is that things that you have to pay no matter what. So that's your rent, unfortunately it's your tuition, it's your transportation, and your food. The top 4 things that people spend their money on. I wish we can go up to Centennial and say, I'm sorry, I can't afford this right now. I can't pay you. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case, and they'll probably charge you interest if you don't pay them on time as well. So these are the things that you want to include in your budget every single time you create it. I think tuition fees are pretty standard based on your course load, so that should be a good indicator. You should be able to predict what that tuition is going to be. So now we've already have our income, and now we have our tuition. Rent, you can budget for it as well. You know how much you're paying, and that's all the fixed stuff. The variable stuff comes in, and it's what's called discretionary expenses, and what that means is that it's fully within your control on how much you spend in that category. Great example is Starbucks, right? I can say 10 years ago, internet was considered a discretionary expense. I would argue that now, I'm pretty sure it's mandatory that you have internet or you won't be able to function, right? Just the other day, Rogers was working outside my house, and I had my mom and all her sisters, and they're over the age of 60, and they're like, I don't know what to do, right? So internet is very important. So dividing up your expenses is key, because this also gives you a way to figure out what your areas of opportunity are. And I would say food arguably can also be a discretionary expense, because how many of you cook every single meal 365 days a year? Good for you. Good for you. I can say that you are the first person who's ever raised their hand whenever I've asked that question. And that saves a lot of money. But for the most part, a lot of us go out to eat, unfortunately. So when you divide out your expenses and you really say, and I'm a big supporter of credit cards actually, because when you go out into the real world, when you get a job, and when you start getting your own house, you buy your first house, you buy your first car, you're going to need a credit history. And if you're renting from a good old Chinese landlord who asks you to pay cash, you're not going to have that on record to build your credit. So having a credit card is a great way to build up your credit. So when you go for your first car loan, they're not going to be like, well, you don't have any credit history, we're going to charge you the most interest possible, right? The thing, and credit card debt can be the worst debt possible, but it can also be the best debt possible depending on how you manage it. So we're going to talk about that too. But the reason why I like credit cards is you can spend everything on your credit card so that every month it's in one simple place and you can see where you're spending all your money. And with credit cards these days, especially if you bank with the big banks, they'll categorize it for you. So they say, hey, Jackie, you've spent 90% of your income on food and then 10% of your income on your house. There's a problem. Let's fix it. So all of these apps are available to you free of charge, and I'm going to teach you ways to use a credit card properly so that you can use this to your advantage, because I'm telling you, credit cards are probably the number one most misunderstood financial tool that people are scared to use because of the misconceptions around it. So we'll get back to that, okay? So far, does anyone have any questions about the budgeting and how to create one? Pretty straightforward? Okay. What do you think is the most common challenge when it comes to budgeting? Yeah. Keeping a record of your expenses and tracking. Yep, that's definitely the case. Because sometimes, you might buy a coffee and you might take cash out of your pocket and you forget. And if you do that every single day, that could amount to a lot more money than you thought. Yep. I would argue, and let's go back to our brain and our heart, because I love them, is your brain spends all this time building this perfect budget, and he calls it the plan. And now your heart is chasing something, and the butterfly is like a metaphor, and then he just crashes right through the wall, and then your plan is ruined. A lot of the times, that's the most, in addition to spending money and with forgetting to track it, is you're so fixated on something of immediate gratitude that your budget goes out the window. I can tell you for the past, and thankfully, for the past 8 years, I've really, really, really wanted a Louis Vuitton bag. I don't know why, I just really want it. And that thing, I think when I first saw it 8 years ago, I think it was like $700, and now it's like $2,100. It's ridiculous. And why do you need to spend $2,000 on a bag? But I really, really want it. And every time I go to Yorkdale, I always walk in, I always ask to see the bag, and then thankfully I've always been able to walk out. So budgeting is a lot about being able to control what your heart wants for your long-term goals. But then I have to go back to, you need a reason to save. Why are you saving? So if I want to go to Japan next year. It's in the cards. Hopefully we've saved enough money. But when I go to Japan, I don't want to have to cook instant noodles at my hotel. I want to be able to enjoy my vacation. But to do that, I can't buy my $2,000 bag. So if you have a strong enough why, you'll be able to have a successful budget, and your heart will hopefully walk around your plan and keep your plan intact. So whether that why would be, I have a strong desire to buy a house like within 5 years of graduation, or I want to pay my OSAP within 5 years of 5 years of graduation, or I want to be able to go on this family trip, or I want to take my mom on a trip. Whatever your reason why is, as long as it's strong enough, your little habits that form day to day, you'd be able to change them so that you stick on budget and you're able to achieve your goals. So what a lot of people don't realize is finance is probably like 90% emotion and 10% brain. You can be the smartest person in the world, but if your emotions aren't intact, your plan can go completely kaput. So I would say think of that when you guys start budgeting, when you're writing down your expenses. I always use food because that's where I spend my money on. If you guys have any other suggestions so I can stop using a food example, please let me know. I don't know, iPhone cases, jewelry, like I'm not into that stuff, but those can be some things too. And I mean, when you guys are looking for jobs, like you have to go buy a suit. Honestly, I wish I could just interview in my pajamas, but unfortunately, like, you need to look presentable. So what other options are there? I know that at some places, if you're a student, you can actually borrow a suit to do an interview, and they actually don't charge you. You know, they do that here? Great, that's perfect, right? First impressions, is that what it's called? Okay, so first impressions allows you to borrow a suit so that you can do your interview. That's great, because I remember, like, suits aren't cheap, and you don't want to be the one that's wearing like a giant suit and going into an interview, because that's just as almost as bad as going and showing up in your pajamas, right? Um, so I would encourage you to look for some opportunities like that. Okay, so 2 items I want you to prioritize before we start with your tuition and budgeting for that is emergencies, right? Like what I said in the beginning was the number one cause of stress in financial matters is not having the money when you need it. So I know everybody comes from different backgrounds and different situations, but just as an example of mine, back to my single mother, who sounds like a really bad budgeter right now, but sometimes she'll come to me and she goes, I need $1,000, just out of the blue. For what? Doesn't matter, I just need it. And hopefully some of you can relate to this analogy, whether you have family that you're supporting back home, whether you have a younger sibling that you're trying to help out, or even your car, right? If you guys do have a car and your car suddenly breaks down, that's another expense. Or let's take the TTC, because they're ever so reliable at always breaking down, that you can use that as an example. If you're on the TTC and you're late for school and your exam is coming up, everybody's going to be Ubering, and you're going to have to pay that Uber, and then that's what causes you stress. But if you have a little pot of money that you say, and it could be a piggy bank, and it's marked for emergencies, and you have $100 built up, that $50 Uber ride is not as bad anymore, because you're not taking it from the money that you wanted to save for your goal, your vacation, your jewelry, your whatever. You're taking it out of the emergency pot, and that's what it's there for, right? So that's what I want you to think about. Sudden loss of income. Christmas is around the corner, holiday seasons are around the corner, so now is a great opportunity to actually look for temporary part-time jobs. I know the retail sector, I know Apple Store is hiring a lot of students right now just to work during the holiday season, because it gets so busy. That's a great way to start stacking up, and I know you have to study as well, so budgeting your time and making sure maybe you can land a few part-time jobs and overlap them, right? But a sudden loss of income can also be very detrimental to your budget, right? If you thought you were going to make $200 this week working at Baskin Robbins, but suddenly the boss did a health inspection and now his store shut down, well, you're out of a job. What are you going to do, right? So always having a fallback option, and in lieu of being able to find a job with a snap of your fingers, an emergency fund is there to make sure that you have enough money so that you can continue to pay your rent, your transportation, and your tuition, and your food. The second thing I want you to prioritize is your future self, okay? When I was in school, and Queens, trust me, cost a lot of money, I was like, yay, OSAP, interest-free loan. 4 years later, I was like, ugh, $60,000, I gotta pay that. What was I doing during the entire time my loan was free, right? I wasn't saving money to pay it off. God knows what I was doing. So, thinking that, you probably have student debt, and if you don't, that's great. But if you have student debt, putting away $50, $100 a month to make sure that you can pay that off in the end really does help, because it makes that task less daunting when those loans come up to payment mode, right? If you don't have student debt, pay your future self. Like I said, have that goal in place. What do you want to do in 2 years, 3 years' time? After you graduate, do you want to take a trip with your friends? Do you want to buy that $2,000 purse? Whatever it is, I'm very supportive of people setting that goal and achieving that goal. And I know that older financial planners, if you say I want to buy a $2,000 purse, like, well, that's not a smart financial decision. You should think about something else. You know what? I don't care. If it fuels you enough to force you to save, I don't care if you're going to buy a $2,000 like thermos or computer or whatever. As long as it makes you happy and it makes you set those goals, eventually when you become more mature, your goals are going to change. Now I want to talk about emergencies. Now, an emergency fund is only as good as the person who is putting into it. So in this example, you have Garfield, and it says, in case of emergency, break glass. He breaks the glass, there's nothing in here. So an emergency fund is only useful if you actually start to put money in it. So I have a friend, her car broke down, she had to fix something, I don't know what it was, and it was about $400, and that was in January. So she's like, great, I had $500 in my emergency fund. I used it. Didn't hurt. She didn't put a single penny into it afterwards. Don't ask me why. She was like, oh, well, my emergency is done, so, it still has $100. I'll just leave it there. Well, unfortunately, during that time, from January till now, she bought a cat, and this cat decided to run across the street, and it actually got nicked by a kid on a bike. So the poor cat needed surgery, and I don't know if any of you have pets, but it costs $800 just to get stitches on, like, a cut. If it was me, I'd be like, give the cat away. But that's me. So now she's $800. She's like, crap, I don't have any money. I have $100 in my emergency fund, and that's it. What am I supposed to do? $700 is a lot of money. And if you work a part-time and you're in school, like where are you going to pick up extra shifts? If you make $14 an hour after taxes, because the government is great and always taxes us, like you're making $80 in one night, like that's a lot of time that you have to spend to make up that money. So I always tell people, for your emergencies, make sure you put money into your emergency fund. Don't just say, oh, well, I'll skip it this time because I know I'm okay, but I'll put in double next month. That never happens. You have to make it automatic. Whether it's $10 a month, $5 a month, I don't care. Obviously, $5 a month may not get you very far, but it's the habit, okay? So if you guys don't remember anything about this entire session, is save for emergencies. So I talk about this all the time, is, how prepared are you? Repairing a car, being stuck on TTC, taking care of family. What if you failed a course? Now you have to retake it. As an international student, that sucks because your tuition is so much higher than us domestic students, right? But that costs money as well. Centennial is not going to be like, oh, that's okay, you failed, we'll give you like a free pass. The second time is free. No, they're going to charge you. Sudden loss of income we talked about, and also types of emergency funds, right? Debt can actually be a good emergency fund. So credit cards is an example. Let's say you need your car fixed. Let's say it's only going to, maybe not a car, let's say something else. Like let's say you broke a window in your house and it's going to cost like maybe $500 to repair. You know you're going to get paid next week because you've been working very diligently over the holidays, but you don't have the money now, but you'll have it in 2 weeks. A credit card can help you pay that expense, and you don't need to pay the interest on it if you pay the credit card back in 30 days. That's so much better than a payday loan. It's so much better than borrowing money from friends or family, right? So that's why I say credit cards can be a good budgeting tool. And making sure you have access to these emergency type funds, whether it's savings, debt, in terms of credit cards, or even insurance, right? I think Centennial provides these students with a health and dental plan, so if you need your teeth fixed or anything like that, you guys have insurance to cover it. That costs money, and I don't know how much you guys pay for it, but the school also pays for it as well and helps supplement it. So these are ways that you can also prepare for emergencies in addition to saving yourself. I ask this question a lot because my answer is pretty on point, is if you won the lottery, what would you do? And Scotiabank actually did a study, which is quite interesting. When people said, and they say it's a gift, but I'm going to use a lottery as an example. If you won $20 in the lottery, what would you do with that $20? Would you save it or would you spend it? How many people would save it? How many people would spend it? I would spend it. It's $20. It's not going to get you anywhere. That's my thoughts. But when you turn it into a bigger amount of money, and if you won $150, now instead of 41% of people saying that they'd spend it, 15% of people said that they would spend it. So more people were likely to save $150 instead of $20. And the only reason is because $150 sounds like a lot more money. So that's why I'm telling you, when finance and budgeting is 90% emotions, is because people see $20 as such a small sum of money that spending it today is not going to have a big impact on your finances. But the truth is that it could. So that's why I always go back to, what are your goals? If you're saving for your vacation, every little bit helps. Do you really need to spend that $20? All those questions go through your head before you spend every dollar. Okay? Yeah. So What's the best way to save? And I always like using this example because, again, like I said, I didn't know I needed to save money until I started working. This is a chart of two people. You have John on the left and you have Susan on the right. Both of them contribute the same amount of money each year. The only difference is that John starts right now and Susan waits until she's done school, until she graduates, until she has a good job, until she feels comfortable, and then she starts 10 years later after John. They save the same amount of money, but and John only saves for 10 years and Susan saves for 10 years. Okay? John has a lot more money than Susan because he starts earlier. So John total amount contributes. So years contributed, they both contribute for 10 years. You go to the second line, years invested. John's invested for 20 years because he started earlier, and Susan's only invested for 10 years. Total amount contributed, John puts in total out of his pocket $50,000. Susan, on the other hand, had to put in double. She puts in $100,000. And at the end of the day, they both have the same amount of money. So, I wish I had $50,000 just to throw out there, but the whole point of this example is starting early. It's never too late to start early, okay? The person who starts early ends up with more money. And notice how it says invested. So no, not putting it into your piggy bank, but actually investing it, letting your money grow, letting your money earn interest, letting your money make a good return. That's what makes the difference, okay? And the key here is starting early. So how much should you save? And this is more so, it's more numbers, but I wanted to show you. So there's 4 charts. It might be a little small, but I'll walk you through it. So the top left-hand corner is somebody saving $100 a month. And the corner on the right is someone saving $200. So what it is it's showing you that the longer you save and the more money you save, the more money you'll have in the future. And let's really think about it. $100, maybe that's 2 weeks worth of working, 1 week worth of working. But if we save that over 2 years, $100, let's say 3%, we'll have about $2,500 after 2 years. If we save $200, we'll have $5,000. Yeah, so interest rate 3%, 5%, 7%. Yeah, it's all compounded. So basically what it's telling you is that an extra $100 a month can go a long way. I can tell you that I hardly drink Starbucks. I use Starbucks as an example because it's something that most people relate to, but I put $100 in my Starbucks card in January and I'm still using it today. And I haven't reloaded it yet. So my example is always going to be food. When we go out to eat nowadays, because also I make a little bit more money than I did when I was a student, it's about $50 for 2 people for a meal, which is, to be honest, it's a lot of money in my opinion. But if I just save that $50, 2 years later, I'd probably have a lot more money than I did eating it. And where does it go? It just goes to your butt, and you just get fat. So really, would you rather have more money or be fat? Well, yeah. So investment-wise, so that's where mutual funds come in, and you can talk to your investment advisor on how you can probably achieve these types of returns. But this is more so for illustrative purposes. Unfortunately, you're not going to get a guaranteed 7% interest rate nowadays, but there are investments that can probably mimic that. Okay. No. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. How are we for time? It's 2:10. Okay, we have 20 minutes. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is mainly what type of investments accounts that are available to most Canadians. Now, the interesting thing is, and I would urge you to talk to your lawyers if you guys are non-residents of Canada, if you guys are here on a study permit. There are registered accounts, and what a registered account means is something that the government gives you an incentive tax-wise to put your money in. So you get some sort of tax benefit by putting your money into those accounts, okay? Most used are your tax-free savings account and your RRSP, which is your registered retirement savings plan. You also have an RESP, which is your Registered Education Savings Plan. So some of you, if your parents, if you guys were born here or if you've been here for a long time, your parents may have saved money for your college education in a Registered Education Savings Plan. You have a Retirement Income Fund, which we're not going to get into, and then other accounts, which would be a non-registered account. A non-registered account is just like any savings account, but the government doesn't give you any incentives on saving money in it. Okay, no tax incentives. And then you have pensions and you have group plans, and we'll talk about that. And then those are plans that you would get if you start a career and you work with a good employer, a big employer. They may have pensions for you. And basically, all it is a fancy word for if you save money, the employer is going to save money for you as well. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about the tax-free savings account and the RSP, and then I'm pretty sure we're almost done. So, tax-free savings account. This was under the registered plan column, which means that the government gives you a tax benefit or some sort of tax incentive for putting money into this account. So, contributions are not tax deductible. What that means is if you get your paycheck, you have $100. I'm going to use this because I'm a visual person. You get $100. You put $100 into that savings account. The government doesn't give you any incentive at that time. Okay? Your growth and withdrawals are tax-free. So what you have to understand about Canada is everything has to be taxed. So because you've already paid tax on your paycheck, right? You think you make $1,000, but then you have all your little deductions before they deposit the money into your bank account. You've already paid tax on that income. So when you take it out, the government says, thank you for investing in your tax-free savings account. We're not going to charge you any tax when you take that money out. Okay? We'll go through an example which will make this a little easier to understand. The eligibility is that you have to be a Canadian resident. So what a lot of people think when it says Canadian resident is that you have to be a permanent resident or you have to be a Canadian citizen. That is actually not correct. You just need to be a tax resident of Canada. That's two different things. Canadian resident, PR, Canadian citizen, that's political immigration stuff that I don't know anything about. Tax resident means you pay your taxes in Canada. You file a tax return every single year. You are a tax resident of Canada. Therefore, you are eligible to open this account as long as you're over 18 and you have a SIN number. Okay? Now, what the trick is if you file taxes in more than one country, then your other country might tax you, but Canada will not. Okay? So that's the difference. A lot of people think that if they can't open a tax-free savings account because they're an international student or they don't have PR, they don't have Canadian citizen. That's actually incorrect. You are eligible to open it. Now, if you're going back and forth between countries, you may not want to, but if you know you're going to stay here for a very long time, then you can open one. Okay? Registered retirement savings plan. So this is, think about it as opposite of a tax-free savings account. So you make your money, the money is deposited into your bank account, you paid your Canadian taxes. When you put the money into an RSP, the government says, thank you for putting money into your RSP. We're going to give you the tax back. So whatever tax you paid on this income, we're going to give you the tax back. So you can put it in as well, or you can just spend it, which most people do, but I recommend they don't. Anyways, they give you the tax back. Okay? You're like, wow, that's really great. The government gives me my tax back? That's amazing. No, they're the government. So when you need to take the money out, so now we're taking it out, the government goes, thank you for using the RSP. Now that you're taking your money out, we're going to take our tax back. So now instead of 2 business cards, you get one goes to the government and one goes to yourself. So now your question is, okay, why would anyone do that? Because depending on your income, and this is what we would talk about when you work one-on-one with a financial planner, because this is very individual and it varies case by case. But generally speaking, most students, I recommend to start with your tax-free savings account first. So we talked about the contributions, the withdrawals, and the objectives. Best used when? Your RSP, you want to use it when you're at your highest tax bracket. In Canada, they tax you based on how much money you make. The more money you make, the more taxes you pay. So if you use a TFSA when you are a student not making a lot of money, it's the most tax advantageous vehicle for you. If you are a professor and you make lots and lots of money, then you would probably put your money in your RSP before your TFSA. So these are conversations that as a financial planner I have individually with my clients, because everybody is different and everybody has different amounts of money to work with, right? If you have $50 a month, is it, sometimes we'll go over a discussion on, is it better to put it in both? Is it better to put it in one? Some people have $500,000 to work with, and that answer is different. But generally speaking, students, you start with TFSA first, max that out, and then go to RSP. For higher income earners or people who are well into their careers, you want to start with your RSP first and then go to your TFSA. Okay? Yeah. So the question was, would you transfer, when you, after graduation and you find a job, would you transfer money from your TFSA to your RSP? It depends. The short answer is usually no, but it depends. So it depends on your situation and the numbers and everything like that. Yeah.
So my situation is kind of backwards because I had a career for like 16 years, but now I'm back. So I have an RSP, but I don't have a T. So should I get that as well?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah. And again, short answer, yes. So the question was, I've been working for 16 years. I have an RSP. But I don't have a TFSA. Should I start putting money into my TFSA? And the short answer is yes. There's many reasons why, and then for those of you who can stick around, I can actually show you the numbers on how it works, but I know you guys probably need to get to class, so I'll finish up the presentation in the next couple minutes, and then if you guys want to go through the math with me, we can go through the math, okay? So types of investments. So what I want to emphasize is TFSAs and RSPs are types of accounts. So think about it like a water bottle. It is the holder of your money. And they come in different shapes and forms. So think, let's say this is a Costco water bottle, and then you have a Dasani, and you have an Aquafina, and they all have different rules. You can hold the following types of investments in your account. So a lot of people say, I have an RSP, and it's making me 2% interest. That's actually incorrect. The type of investment in your RSP is making you that interest. So one of the types of investments you can hold in these accounts is a high interest savings account. Most people have this. Banks always tell you to open it. It pays you a measly 0.0001% interest. If you bank with Tangerine or somebody else, they may squeeze out a 1%. So on every $100, you're making $1. Woo! Okay. GICs, guaranteed investment certificates, you have to commit for a standard period of time. Generally, you get a higher amount of interest on these types of investments. Okay. Exchange traded funds. These are passive, mostly passive types of investments where it's trying to mimic a certain stock exchange, or it's trying to mimic a set of stocks. So you can have a tech exchange traded fund, a bank exchange traded fund, and basically you're investing in all the banks, and there's no professional management usually when it comes to this. There's no principal guarantee, and your fees can range anywhere from 0.05% all the way to 2.2%, la-da-da. Mutual funds. Mutual funds is an actively managed investment product that allows you to invest either or both in stocks and bonds, and you have a professional money manager. So if anybody's studying finance, financial analysts, all those types of people, their job is to analyze the markets and make decisions on what to put in this portfolio to make a certain objective. Mutual fund fees are typically higher than exchange traded funds because you have an active person making decisions and looking at the portfolio and deciding on what to do. It's not autopilot, it's fully managed. And then your last one is stocks, of course. It's an ownership of a company. So Apple sells a lot of iPhones, they make money, they give you the money back. As a stockholder, you make money off of that. And that's what a stock would be. There's no principal guarantee. It's easily bought and sold, but you could lose all your money, or you can make quadruple your money, or sky's the limit. So these types of investments, I actually listed them in terms of risk, so lowest risk to highest risk, okay? And then lastly, money saving tips. So look for deals when you shop. I'm a big, not as bad as my mom, but I'm a big couponer. So if you guys have the app Flip, price matching, I know Walmart kind of changed their price matching recently, but if you need apples, don't go to Loblaws and spend $2 a pound. Go to No Frills and get the ugly looking apples that probably taste the exact same for 97 cents. Like, we're not apple connoisseurs. I think we can live with a 97-cent pound apple. Use credit cards to your advantage. So like I said, credit cards can give you points. Credit cards can give you rewards, right? Cash back. If you pay your credit card on time, that's not a bad thing. This year, I think I got like over $300 of rewards from my credit cards on stuff that I was gonna buy anyways, right? Like my laptop costs a lot of money. I got cash back on it. All these little things. Like the reason why people don't like credit cards is because they think that they'll charge you interest. But no, you get 30 days of free interest. And not a lot of people know that. Buy, sell, trade, use items. Kijiji is my favorite. For textbooks, I always used textbooks when I was in school, and it saved me a bunch of money. I think net, after all my buying and selling, I probably spent only $200 over my 4 years on textbooks. Using apps to help you budget. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget. It's also a good tool to use. Mint, Intuit Mint. If you guys are okay with sharing your credit card information with a third party, it will track all your bank accounts and all your credit cards and input everything into the app for you, and you don't even have to do anything. That's only if you're comfortable with sharing your information, but I think that everybody has your information anyways. You might as well use it to your advantage. And then the last thing is look for value, okay? Like Costco water, they sell a case of 40 water bottles for $3. You can also buy a case of 12-pack Dasani for $3. Is it going to taste different? Probably not. But if you're going to buy a phone, I would hope you're not going to go to like St. Lawrence Market and look for the bum beside the street selling the used iPhone 5s. Like you're going to invest your money on something that you use every single day. So it's about value, not about cheapness. Okay? And that's it. Yeah, a financial planner is basically like a personal trainer. Simon's electronic personal trainer is very personal. You're too slow. Really depends on who you work with. If you work with a robo-advisor, they're going to give you your notifications, but it's up to you. Like I said, investing is 90% emotional. If you know that you don't have your own self-control to deal with certain situations, maybe talk to a professional. That's why I went to Good Life for about 3 years, didn't lose a single pound. I go to personal trainer now. I've gained like 15 pounds, but that's because I eat too much. But I've gotten a lot stronger because I don't have any self-motivation to do those exercises nonstop for an hour. So think about how you are and how you work. Start creating your budget today. If you want that link to the budget, just leave your email with me and then I'll send that to you. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We really appreciate all the time that you took. How was that session, everybody? Did you all walk out with something, I hope? I know I did. I mean, and I've heard this session more than once, and every single time she does it, I learn something new. So I really hope that you do take some of the tips that she said and practice them. It will definitely help. And just on behalf of Centennial, we just want to say thank you so much for participating with us in Career Week. We appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for Jacqueline? We just have a few minutes before our next speaker needs to come in and set up. But does anybody here have any questions for her?
As I said, I'm a newcomer. I've been here for 6 months only, and and I feel I'm constantly tracking my credit score, and I feel that it's going up very slow. Do you have any suggestion for me to, speed up the process about increment?
That's a very good question. I've actually never had that question before. What I know counts towards your credit score, and now I'm not a credit expert, but I know like the more bills that you have under your name, the more credit cards. Now, I'm not telling you to go and get out 5 credit cards, but having a credit card and using it consistently also helps build your credit. As you pay it off, build it, pay it off, build it, pay it off, that just adds to your score. So you've only been here 6 months, which could be the reason why, but if you have any like utility bills in your name, if you have a phone bill that's in your name and you pay that on time, those are things that add to your score. In terms of getting it up quickly, I'm not too sure. But I know the more credit items that you have and the more that you pay it off quickly, the better it is. And yeah, that's how you add to it. That's how you build it up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have this for you. Let me say thank you for participating. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Just a reminder, if you can please take the time, just grab your phone and just take a picture of the URL code. That would be greatly appreciated. And I know that some of you may want to ask some questions, just because our next speaker is set to actually speak in just a few minutes. So if we could just maybe move the questions outside, Jacqueline, if you're okay with that, that would be great. Okay? Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate if you could just do our evaluation. That would